There can be only one podcast, and may it be the Prince of the Universe. Hi, folks. I'm Matt.
And I'm Wes. This is not NPR.
I was kidding earlier.
This is not NPR.
All right. No, it's not. This is talking about wrestling again. Our grand return to wrestling. You know, our wrestling podcasts have a bit of a following.
Really?
Yes.
Well, maybe we need to revisit.
We pick up a tick whenever we talk wrestling. So
RASSLIN.
Yeah,
that's wrestling.
Wrestling is what we're going to talk about. Don't talk about JR under Jim Ross under the black hat.
Which I'm wearing a hat tonight.
You are? Oh, is that the reason for
No,
that?
I just tried to look cool. And
okay.
We'll see.
Okay. And your I Love Hot Moms t-shirt?
Hey, everybody, you know, I'm trying to give a shout out there.
Was it date night tonight?
Yeah, with Heath. And Brandon.
Did you go out with Heath?
Yeah, we went and had a few drinks. And
oh, shut up.
Yep, had some food at Enoch's.
Oh,
a Monroe
okay.
staple.
Nice. It is a staple there. You get the burger, I'm assuming. What,
yes.
Galway or Belfast? Those are my favorites. Or neither one.
I got neither one. I got
a different type.
One that had like sauerkraut and the Cornelius, okay. I believe is
Cornelius.
Name.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't been in years because I know it switched. I know the kids run it now, right? Is that how it goes?
I don't know if the kids are running it. It looks like adults are running it to me.
No, I mean her children. She's old.
Yeah.
Her kids are older too,
yeah.
But I'm just saying her kids are older. Yeah, when she ran it, she was not very nice, and I never went. So maybe I should go back. Plus, the service was really bad.
Well, it's a bar food.
If you're not if you're not a regular, you don't get service. If you're a regular, they'll come in. They'll give you whatever you want whenever, as fast as they can. If you're not, they'll be like, yeah, you're gonna wait. I get it, but at the same time, that's why I stopped going. I love their burgers, though.
Just be nice. That goes a long way.
That's true. I try to, but then I also can't wait an hour and a half for a burger. So.
You got to get there early. That's what
you got to get there early. That's true. I mean, and if you're eating dinner with Heath, you got to be there early.
Yeah, 6:30. You better be wrapping that shit up.
He's already looking at his watch.
He starts yawning and wanting to watch Hogan's Heroes.
Oh man, that's great. And then Brandon's reading the comic book Logan's Heroes, huh?
Close. He's just one not put his cell phone down.
Oh really? Is he always on the phone?
He is on his phone.
Oh, doing some important texting and looking up stuff.
He just likes to share things with us.
That's nice.
News.
What about carrying a conversation on by yourself? Remember those days when you had to do it without the help of a cell phone?
Times like these.
But that's still fun.
Yeah,
that's still fun. You got to go out and hang out with Heath. That's nice. If this podcast was 4 hours earlier, we could probably get him on.
Yeah, he's hit or miss with,
it's about 8:30.
He yawned, I think, about 7 times in the last 10 minutes we were there. Like he was fading fast. I don't know if he had to get back on the tractor tomorrow morning or what, but he was.
He turns into a gremlin after 8 p.m. if he's not in bed.
Man.
But he wakes up early, doesn't he?
I'm assuming so, to get that tired this early.
Perhaps so. But anyway, well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you had a fun time, all fed and everything.
Yeah, let's do this.
So wrestling, you gave me JR's book. I read it. You started to read it, but then you realized very quickly you watch all of his interviews. I'm sure you listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I listen to his podcast pretty faithfully.
So this is basically just the cliff notes of all the things he talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I read pretty much all of it, but I didn't read all of it,
because you knew the stories,
right? Yeah.
So someone who's listened to JR a lot, the podcast may not be the best buy for them, because it
wasn't for me, unfortunately.
Okay, that's
fine.
I
wanted to like the book because a lot of it, the most important stuff to me was his wife passing away,
right?
Which I found pretty tragic, and when he talks about it on his podcast, it's pretty authentic emotions,
right? Well, okay, then that's fair. Maybe it'd be better to listen to these stories on his podcast rather than just read the book. Okay, all right. So, and I don't listen. I've listened to some of his stuff when he is on there with Conrad and stuff, and I've listened to him tell those stories a million times. And I listened to a bunch of that on YouTube once, but a lot of these stories I did not know. Some of them I did because I've read other wrestlers' autobiographies, so they kind of match up a little bit, or it gives his side of the story. Now, this is his second book.
Correct.
His first one was Slobber Knocker.
Correct.
And so he mentions that, but this one picks up about the time that it's the WWF Attitude Era is ending.
Correct.
And then it's going into a new era of entertainment, the WWE.
Correct.
All right, and so that's kind of where we are time-wise with this, just to let everyone know, the gist of the book here.
Laying the groundwork.
And a lot of the stuff at the very beginning, I remembered all of it, and then there's stuff that I'd heard about, so the book didn't lose me, is what I'm saying.
No, it didn't lose me either. I think I came in with such high expectations.
Well, when you've talked for so long and done so many podcasts about your life, about your work, it's hard to say anything new.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he had a book contract and said, all right, well, we'll put it all in book. Yeah. So if you want it all on file to read, there you go. That's basically how I see this.
Yeah, there's so much media available to all of us now. It's reading a book.
If he wasn't readily available to do interviews and didn't tell that many stories that much, then yes, this would be great.
Yeah.
But because he's just been so open to the public and shared his life story several times through interviews and his own podcast, even like you said, the death of his wife, I'd much rather probably hear that than see it written out.
Yeah, that's the thing now. Like I don't know, the relationship I have is based off that podcast so much stronger now because I've listened to it faithfully for the past few years. And it's probably my number one along with the Mick Foley one that Conrad does. Hey, it's Conrad. But I mean, those are my top two.
Okay, top two. Well, yeah, obviously. And I've listened to a few of it too. So yeah, he is good. He keeps the podcast interesting.
Yes.
This one, I'll just go over the highlights of the book and what I thought about it. First off, he talks about his Bell's palsy and Vince kind of working that in the storyline, mocking him at every chance he can get when he was kind of sensitive of it.
Sure.
I need to ask you, and he does this a lot, like when he has the colonoscopy or whatever, and then Vince does the big bit making fun of that too. I mean, he keeps saying about how he gets picked on, how he gets kind of run through the coals, but Vince did that to everyone. It didn't seem like he was just picking on good old JR.
Well, I think he did that to everybody, but I think he did it extra to JR. Like there's some people that Vince, and I think that in JR talks a lot about on his podcast about, he had to shoulder a lot of that Lawler didn't have to shoulder. Like Vince would just terrorize them over the headsets and not really terrorize Jerry, because I think a lot of it is Jerry has left and came back before, and it's just such a different relationship. And I think that Jim Ross just loves the wrestling business, and sometimes when you love the company more than the company loves you, or it's not a balanced relationship, that's what happens, unfortunately.
Right.
Professional or personal.
That's true. He talks about Owen's death, which is one I'd heard him do the interviews a million times on.
Just tragic.
About how he was just it was just all shock and he didn't know what to say, but he had to be the one. There was no one giving him direction because they didn't know what to do.
Right. They were counting him down just to go into it.
Counting him down to tell him, oh, by the way, you need to tell everyone Owen Hart's dead. He went, how? He said, you got 10 seconds before we go live. And he had to. I mean, he didn't know what to say, so all that was fresh and new and raw right there. The
very
emotions
authentic,
you saw, very authentic, very real. Probably the first time wrestling got that real on a pay-per-view, would you say?
To that extent, I think the only other thing you could say that's close to that would be when Brett got screwed at Survivor Series, and
it got real there. But the thing is,
nothing
there wasn't. That was at the end. And there wasn't any dialogue.
Correct.
There wasn't anything.
Yeah,
fans were more confused than anything. This one, something serious happened, and fans kind of realized.
And like you said, it's the middle of the show. Like, they just kept going, which is heartbreaking.
It's
for
heartbreaking,
everybody.
But at the same time, and this is one thing I don't think JR addressed. I mean, he didn't defend it either. He just said they just kept going. And I think he's right, because I think it was just a stunned, this has never happened. What do we do? And the only thing they knew how to do is the show goes on. Someone gets injured and stuff. And at the time, they knew he was bad, but how bad did the wrestlers know? Honestly, if he would have died, I think the wrestlers would have stopped.
Well, I think
but then later on they found out.
I mean, they were pretty sure he was dead when they were wheeling him into the back.
You could see Jerry. I've seen that video where Jerry's just shaking up. He goes, because he's kind of shaking. He goes, he's not good.
I think that if you would put that situation if that would have happened to Shane or Stephanie, that show would have stopped.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Unfortunately.
He talks about his handshake agreement with Jeff Jarrett, which is the dumbest thing in the world. He's been around this business long enough to know that stuff happens. Lex Luger and it happens all the time. A handshake agreement's not going to do it, but he was kind of acting like, well, he was a man of honor, and I thought he was going to. Well, dude, how many times have you seen this in the business already, especially with the Monday Night Wars? I mean...
Yeah, and I think that, and this is just to piggyback on that, Jeff's side of that story is pretty good, where he understands... Well, he kind of spoke to, he was not one of Jim Ross's guys.
Right. No, he wasn't.
He was not part of... If there's a varsity team and a junior varsity, he's on the junior varsity team. So he's playing, but he's not going to be...
If
so
JR
he understood, they're going to lowball me because I'm really not figured into these plans. And all he did was want to get all of his money on up front rather than wait on the company to pay him out what they felt was discretionary, which I think that in that business at that time, you had to do it that way. So nothing wrong with Jeff Jarrett.
But the thing is, though, just for JR to go be like, well, I thought a handshake meant a handshake back in the day. Come on, man. There's no way. Especially when that situation, because Jeff Jarrett was in his rights to do that, but it's happened a million times. Don't shrug your shoulders and go, I just didn't see that one coming. Well, you should have.
I think it was pretty obvious that.
But I mean, Vince even tells him how this happened. I mean, the day before the pay-per-view, he's out of contract, and they can see that.
Right.
It's just carelessness.
Yeah.
It's just carelessness, and that stuff happens, and he deserved to get all the money up front.
Sure.
He deserved, because they screwed up.
Yep.
You got him now. You got him. I don't blame him at all.
I don't think JR did anything wrong necessarily, other than he should not have relied on a non-contract agreement.
He was too naive. And in a world where you've seen this happen a million times, I'm with Vince. There is no excuse for that.
Yeah.
I do agree with JR about the invasion storyline. Of course, this has been mentioned in several other books too. Dozens. What a grand opportunity that was just blown away, just blown completely, because everyone was talking to Vince about, you can't let these guys beat the WWE guys. They always got to be stronger and win. And so it was a one-sided battle that really got boring and old and just ran its course way sooner. You could have had this thing going for years.
Yeah, be careful what you get, what you wish for when you get it, and you just crap the bed.
Yeah. He's a bit. I mean, he and Austin are big buddies, so he always defends Austin every chance he can get, which is fine. That's expected. But talks about his friendship there. I believe he spoke about the plane ride from hell, because he mentions a bunch of stories from it about what happened, and he goes, well, what was I to do? I mean, they were giving the guys free food and free drinks. I mean, I can't control. Yeah, but if you don't have their respect, they won't pull that type of crap.
I think he has their respect. I think that if anybody, I'm sure most people listening to this podcast have been on a plane, it's not the most enjoyable experience.
Oh, no.
And if you're sitting there waiting to take off and you're not taking off, there's a lot of anxiety. And if you have access to alcohol,
you're
going to partake. And if you're not going anywhere for hours, you're doomed.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And those guys were outlaws back then. It's just not the way it is now.
That's true.
20 years ago was the remnants of guys, driving 300 miles a night with 357s in their car.
Exactly. I love the story. I'd never heard this one about why he never went to TNA, about meeting with Dixie Carter, about talking about things, about what he wanted.
Right.
About saying, hey, you got to do this. You're looking at trouble early. And that was exactly what was wrong with TNA.
Yeah.
That's how they burned out quickly.
Yeah.
It's sad because they started off really strong. I remember talking about that, getting Megan and I were watching a little bit of it. And, of course, she did enjoy that. That's where the WCW guys went and stuff like that. But I was hoping for a new life of where, you'd have a new balance, the old and the new. But obviously, it was.
It's
swaying
unfortunate. It's the
old.
same thing now with the product. Just because you have talented performers, if you don't have like the right framework,
Yeah.
and management, you got nothing.
He gave a great story about Vince Russo calling him and saying, "Hey, brother, you need to come over and be with us at TNA." He said, "This coming from the same guy who had just released the book called Forgiven, which we've read and
Correct.
reviewed."
Right.
And he quotes the horrible things he
Right.
said about JR and his Bell's palsy.
Right.
And I was like, brutal. Of course, Vince Russo, to his credit, JR said, did apologize to him
Sure.
for all those things he said. But still, that is pretty ballsy to ask for the guy to come over when you know you just wrote a book out that probably is going to, if he didn't read it, someone's going to say, "Hey, JR, there's something in Vince Russo's book you should know about." Which is probably what happened. I doubt JR picked up Vince Russo's book and said, "Read this sucker."
Yeah, it doesn't take long for people to hear bad news about them.
Yeah. The other one, and this is what I've noticed, and I'm not really I am knocking on JR, but I'm knocking on a lot of people because I believe, out of all of these I have ever read, the only two 100% honest people, have been Chris Jericho and Mick Foley.
Yep.
They have been 100% honest. If they were in the wrong, or if they thought this was the right way and it went wrong, they try to give the other guy's perspective.
Correct.
And they just say, "Well, I felt this, but he felt this. He was in his right to feel that way, but I was not going to feel. I was feeling I was getting screwed, and it was going to stop."
Yep.
No one else has been that honest. In fact, there's a lot of hypocrisy. I mentioned this because I really liked how Eric Bischoff's book started off.
Right.
Most people write books to give their side, to pound their Bible and give their soapbox argument. I'm just here to tell it as it is. And I was thinking, well, that's great. And then he didn't. He went on to a defending rant about defending all his terrible decisions in WCW, and everything. And declining to take shouldering any of the blame, always toss it on anyone else. JR sadly does it as well, I feel, because he talks about how people just suck up to Vince all the time and do stuff and write things and do little things just to get Vince to laugh or give him a compliment, and that's all they fish for. But at the same time, when he goes out there and gives a performance of his life and Vince gives him a compliment, he just basks in the glow of that. He was so proud of that moment. He was so proud. That was one of the kindest things Vince said. Well, yeah, okay. Everyone's enamored with the boss, JR. So don't, because he said, wow, and from then on, I decided that I was going to just wear, I can't remember what it was, but he said, "My God, JR, you gave me your all out there and whatever for that one." So he was really encouraged by that, and he went home, told his wife he was very happy, and he went out there to give it 100% from then on out. He bought into the whatever storyline it was and went all in. That just motivated him. Okay, well, guess what? When the boss compliments you and you want to do something like that again, don't make fun of the other hyenas trying to get a chuckle out of Vince. If you're basking, there's nothing wrong with this, by the way.
That's most 9 out of 10 businesses.
That's 100%.
If your boss is not a big fan of yours, you're probably not going to last.
Exactly. So you want to do stuff that's going to make the boss remember you, point you out, give you a compliment, pat you on the back. But to call everyone else out and saying, they just want to just writing these things, just get Vince's attention and stuff. Okay, well, guess what? That's the boss. You know what it's like, JR.
You're working for that person.
You're working for the same person. You gave he gave you a compliment, and you just glowed about it, and you just talked about how that motivated you. Okay, well, then now go back and read some of your early stuff that you wrote in the same book.
Yeah.
And realize that's why people do. Chris Jericho would say that. Mick Foley would have said that.
Sure.
And by the way, when these guys mess up in their books, they admit it. They said, "I was wrong for this. I did this wrong." I can't remember what it was in Mick Foley's, but it was really good because he said he was told, "Don't do it." And he did it, think it was the right thing, and then realized later on it was awful and went back and apologized. I can't remember what that was, by the way. But anyway, the thing is, these guys admit. I mean, Chris Jericho talking about how his first match in every event he goes to sucks. It's absolute crap.
Right.
Or as they say, the shits.
Yes.
And I
think it could be the drizzling shits.
That's the term for a really bad match. Because Austin is worried about having those matches, as we hear in this one. Because several times he's worried about this match and that match and not working out. The Scott Hall match.
Right.
There was another one too, and I can't remember what it was, but just kind of worried about his whole career. He's losing steam, which is why he said, "Well, I need to go villain all of a sudden." And JR makes the case that I think it was a terrible idea because he was selling tons of merchandise. Yeah, but at the same time, it was getting old. Stone Cold had been the anti-hero for so long.
I think but obviously what they didn't.
How it was handled was terrible. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree with
I don't
that.
think Austin, you could not make that guy a heel. It just was
It
not
just
going
wasn't
to work.
clicking with the audience that we had to deal with what for the next 3 years after that.
You're still dealing with
they're
that to
still
a certain
dealing with
degree
that.
now.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Terrible.
What? It's terrible. He started it though.
Yeah.
He started
It's terrible.
it. And it I don't know how it could have been done, but I
He
can
shouldn't
see
have ever
that-
been a heel. It's just the way. I
Yeah.
think that.
I can see Austin's point though.
No, I could.
He felt he wanted to change
the
the character.
business was cooling off. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Everybody was cooling off.
That's a good point because I don't think Austin realized that. He just knew that he was cooling off and he couldn't see past his own
From
self.
2001 to 2002, the business dropped drastically compared to 2000 to 2001. I mean, you can look at any number, pay-per-view buys, attendance, anything. It was over.
Yeah. You're right. For the most part.
It just everything started leveling out.
So you would have put your foot down and said no, Stone Cold. There's no way.
I would have said there's a better way. What other options do we have other than that? And I'm going to say here's why I don't think it's going to work.
Right.
We don't have anybody that's a good guy,
Yeah.
and people don't
time,
hate
they
you.
didn't.
There's a thing, when they turned Hogan, people were tired of Hogan's act.
Right.
People were not tired of Austin's act.
That's true. That's true.
They just
Austin
weren't.
felt it. And the only way there was no one at the time that he could have feuded with where they wouldn't have chosen him over anyone else.
Correct.
I think later on, you look at if he would have picked on someone who was getting a lot of fan
There's
support
nobody.
and everything. There was
Nobody.
no one at the time.
There's nobody ever.
Ever. Okay. All right.
Not in
Well,
my opinion.
all right. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
If you put him in the ring with Hogan, they're going to cheer Austin. If you put him in the ring with Rock, they cheered Austin.
So the Toronto show, if they would have put Hogan Austin, you think they would have stayed with Austin?
Yes.
Instead of not turned, but started. The tide obviously turned in Toronto.
Well,
they still loved Hogan.
you got a pretty valid point on that. I think the Toronto show was so unique.
That changed the direction of Hogan's storyline, though.
Yeah, but
one show.
I'm saying that I think it was such a unique situation with Hogan to be back. He had been off TV for so long.
I understand that.
And Toronto is rich with Hogan,
and Austin didn't want to fight him because he said their fighting styles were different. Do you believe that?
yes, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think he wanted Hogan to make any money off of him because of the way Hogan treated him.
Okay, yeah.
In WCW.
Well, JR said that wasn't the case. He said it was because Austin said that he felt their styles didn't match up, so they shouldn't do it because it would be a bad.
Well, I think that there's a trick to that, but I don't think Rock and Hogan's match was a 5-star mat classic. It was more like the emotion of that.
The crowd made that match more than the wrestlers.
Yeah, I
did.
mean,
I agree
and
with
that's
that.
what I said. And that's the thing about watching that now. It's almost like you may get something like that now, maybe every 5 years if you're lucky.
Yeah. He talks about how he's picked on and everything, and I forgot to mention this, but he also acknowledges that that's sometimes the best way to get heat because JR is beloved by everyone.
Yeah, personal issues, and he says that.
When you're but I can't feel sorry for you when you're also acknowledging the fact that they got to get heat. You can't just sure, beat up old JR, embarrass him, whatever you have to do to get the heat. Cheap way to get heat, but it worked every time. And some days you just got to go for I know he wore a black hat, but he was basically, in the fans' eyes, the guy that wore the white hat. He was the hero in every storyline. JR's never the villain.
Well, I think that's true. I think your points are true, but
So
I
did
think
they go too far?
Yeah, I think the whole thing about the colonoscopy and all of that is that's just poor taste.
No, definitely.
That's somebody
No.
not having an edit button.
I'm sorry, I'm not talking
on
about Vince. I'm talking about Triple H. I'm talking about whoever had to go into the ring at that time to whoop his ass.
I think it highlights how light the roster was with top level guys. If you've got to get the announcer involved.
Here's the thing:
much.
you can't take on someone that everyone loves because you can't just whoop them around because then that makes them look weak. So
But I mean, they can't whoop. He can't whoop the wrestler. So where's this going?
Well, it just putting heat on him so that the other wrestler who's defending him, like Austin or whoever else was it, can come on out. Who was the other guy he teamed up with? The guy he brought in from Oklahoma,
Dr.
Jack
Death?
Swagger.
Oh yeah,
Jack Swagger to come in and be the hero, you know. So it was served a purpose. But all right, last one. We'll talk about his wife not wearing a helmet. But she had a motorcycle accident in the state of Oklahoma. You have to wear helmets, and that seems to be. And there's of course bad consequences for that. His wife, the whole time in the storyline, he's talking about how he and his wife are basically partners in this, how they did things together, and it's nice when you're looking over the book as a whole, because he's basically just talking about this and how he shared these memories with his wife. He kept that as the central part of the story. He brought his wife into everything, backstage, when he went home, when he moved home, when he did this, when he did that. And so I'd never read Slobberknocker, but I'm assuming his wife was not as central.
I didn't read it
she hadn't
either.
passed away.
But
I would assume she wasn't. Which I'm fine with this. I'm not judging the book. I'm just saying it was nice to talk because his wife was a big part of this book. I don't think she would have. I think she would have been a little bit, but not as big if she had not have passed away.
Probably not. I think that this was, a grieving process, obviously, for anybody who's lost anything.
Yeah.
For that, and I'm sure it's like what he felt like he needed to do as like a love letter to that part of his life that was no longer. Absolutely. So I liked it. I applaud all that.
No, that was good. No, I'm just saying that was good, and I'm glad that he put that all together because it makes you care instead of him just maybe mention his wife here and there, and then he got a call.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's still sad, but now you get to know how much like when they shared the moment when they went to the Hall of Fame, when he got inducted, and she was crying too, and he was crying, and when they shared news about being hired, being fired, the highs and lows, What
a real relationship. A
be.
lot of people that read that, including us, we can't relate to some of these stories because it's just like a fantasy. But anybody that's been in love and you've lost it, you can relate to every bit of that, which most of us can.
Right. No, right, exactly. So that was really good. Now, I wanted to know this because on the podcast, what all did he say? What all... This was in the second to the last chapter, and then it just kind of ended.
Yeah, I mean, he to me more about what the podcast, what he talks about is he doesn't get into detail about it too much. He just really talks about how the process, what happened, and how he tried to come out of it.
Yeah, in the book, he mentions he was on his way home, driving home from a show. He got a call from an unknown number. He usually doesn't pick it up, but he did. It was the hospital saying, hey, your wife's in critical condition. Went there, couldn't believe what was happening, and then later she passed away. At the funeral, everyone showed up. And he really appreciated everyone's support, and people were calling.
Right.
All the big wrestlers called, offered their support and prayers and whatnot, and a lot of them showed up to the funeral, which he said meant a lot too.
Right.
And it kind of ended a little bit on that resting point. That was basically the stop of the book. So I was just wondering.
Well, I think his career was pretty much over at that point. He was doing.
He was happy with NXT. He did talk about his work in NXT. He was very proud of that.
And I mean, he had kind of gotten into New Japan somewhere in that.
Right. That's where he was going.
So his career had kind of shifted from Vince.
Yeah.
It had ran its course. So, yeah, he was kind of getting into a part of his life where he's not going to be traveling. He's not going to have those amount of responsibilities. And it's just one of those sad stories.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
I think that, my ex, her mom died when probably a year or so before her husband retired. It was like this big thing where he worked extra to secure all of this, money and stuff because you don't want to leave too early and leave money on the table. Then he works, and then his wife passes away.
Right.
So it's one of those. It's just one of those tragic things where it's what's most important in your life. Is it? It's a love language. Is it time spent? All those kind of things. So I think it's for that to look at it. For people like us that are in their 40s, it gives you some insight into perspective. Hey, what am I doing all this for?
Yeah. So overall, I'll have to say, if you don't know much, if you don't listen to JR that much, you can read the book and enjoy it. But it sounds to me like you should probably just listen to the podcast, highlights of the podcast and stuff like that. I would agree with that too.
Yeah, I think that for me, the podcast just comes across so much more, and JR is a great storyteller.
Yes.
In the book and on the podcast, but with someone like Conrad who knows how to go high and low, he really navigates it so well. He just gets so much out of JR.
Good. Yeah, so check it out.
Yeah.
Check it out. And also, I want to add something else here, folks, in the comments. Is there another wrestler you'd like us to talk about? We're open to wrestling ideas, so go ahead and give us them, and we'll see you next time on Princes of the Universe.